Demon Slayer Mugen Train, or if you're absolutely nasty, Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba the movie Mugen Train, continues the story of the extremely successful manga as a follow-up to season 1 of its anime adaptation. In this review, I'm going to talk about what I liked and what I didn't like about the story of this movie, and I'm going to briefly talk about whether or not this film is a good jumping on point for new fans. Before I get to that though, some praise is in order. I've never seen a serialized adaptation bounce back and forth between television and film before, so this was an exciting opportunity for the creative team, and based on the tremendous success of this movie, shattering box office records in the middle of a pandemic year as both the highest grossing anime film and Japanese film of all time, I'd say that this innovation paid off. With that said, is this movie worth all the hype? Honestly, I don't think so. Let me explain. I'm going to begin with the positives because I didn't hate this movie, I was just a little underwhelmed. I think that this story adapts the Mugen Train arc from the manga as perfectly as it possibly could. It's nearly a panel-to-panel adaptation of the 17-chapter story arc, and I think that's wonderful for fans to see, and a testament to the creative team over at UFO Table for pulling something like this off so successfully. I also think the film does a great job of fitting into the same style as the anime. It very much feels like a continuation of the story, just in a different medium, which can be tricky when putting together a larger budget film, but all the character models, coloring, and action effects carry over seamlessly from television to the big screen. I also think that goes to show how wonderfully produced the anime itself is, since they didn't feel the need to really step up the style to show off what money can buy. With that said, this movie does have some extra money, and it knows exactly how to use it. I can only imagine that the last 20 or so minutes of this film is where all the big bucks went, because my god, the action exploding on my screen was truly incredible. I also think the Japanese voice cast all do an excellent job, and particularly Satoshi Hino, who plays Rengoku, is phenomenal. He really sells the type of man that Rengoku is with his delivery, and it definitely added to how that character became so endearing to me early in the film. Overall, I think everything having to do with the production was excellently handled, and all my critiques of this film really have nothing to do with anything behind the scenes. My real issues are with the actual plot and the idea of a film adaptation itself. So there's no question in my mind that the team behind this film made the right choice to continue their adaptation of the manga in a movie rather than just an arc in season 2 of the anime, due to the sheer success at the box office, but also the publicity that success garnered. I guarantee you plenty of people now at least know the name Demon Slayer who never would have had this movie not come out, let alone the new fans I'm certain it created. From a financial and marketing perspective, it was a masterful move. I just don't think the actual story of the Mugen Train arc is that strong, and feels like an odd foot forward to the larger world, wherein the lead characters barely interact and the entire final act centers around a relatively newly introduced character, with 2 of the 4 leads watching helplessly while the other 2 are just off-screen unconscious. As an entry point into the larger world of Demon Slayer, I think Mugen Train fails at being a showcase for the character dynamics and overall narrative of the series. If you just watch this movie, you really have no basic understanding of any of the leads. You do get some backstory on Tanjiro through his dream world, but his relationship with Nezuko is paper thin in this arc, and that's not a slam on the story being told. It would be annoying to have all of these in-depth character details trod over again for the sake of the movie-going audience, but I think there's a fine line that this movie didn't balance well. The movie very much felt like a dense continuation of the anime that is hard to decipher rather than an entry point for new fans, and I thought that was ultimately disappointing. I'm sure there are people who really love this movie without ever having seen the anime, and this inspired them to check the show out, which is great, but this isn't a movie I'd feel confident showing someone who has no idea what Demon Slayer is, because there is no context given. The final antagonist's arrival into the plot made me extremely confused, and I felt like maybe I blinked and missed some setup for it, which looking back I apparently did not, so I can only imagine what a noob would think. Honestly, as cliche and simple as it is, I think a 3 to 5 minute summary at the very beginning would have done this film wonders to get its audience all on the same general page with the prior events of the story and the existing character relationships. I'm stunned that wasn't there, and instead they placed an irrelevant scene of the head of the Demon Slayer Corps who plays no role in the movie in that slot. While this didn't ruin the movie for me, since I already have this full context, I still think it was a bit of an odd choice to keep the story so insular, and it did kind of rub me the wrong way. My final issue with the film is the plot. I'm gonna get into spoilers in a moment because I feel I need to, but for now I'll keep it universally friendly. I honestly just think this movie is a bit of a narrative dud, and what would have been a halfway decent short anime arc with a bombastic ending turned into a halfway decent 2-hour movie with a bombastic final 10 minutes. The biggest issue I have with the plot is that the pacing feels off, and I don't really think that's the movie's fault because it is an adaptation of a medium based upon short snippets of storytelling. It really does feel like 4 or 5 anime episodes jumbled together more than it feels like it has the flow of a typical cohesive movie from act to act. The first 45 minutes feel extremely slow, and the last 20 minutes feel insanely chaotic, and then there's a middle chunk of about 30 minutes that kind of got lost in the jumble. I honestly believe I would have enjoyed the story told in this movie more if it was structured as a television arc. The mediums just allow for a different kind of viewing experience, and ultimately, I don't think film was the best one for this particular story. Now I'm going to get into some plot specifics, so if you don't want spoilers, thanks for listening this far, but it's time to bounce out. Alright, so first thing is first, Rengoku is the best fucking character in this whole movie, and I think he works so well within this film because really, it's a self-contained story about him, and the leads of the series are largely background characters except for Tanjiro. I think the reason that Rengoku works so well in this movie is because this is all the development that character receives. You don't need prior context, everything that matters is on display in this movie, and things subtly build with him until there is an explosion of insane, violent action against a centuries-old mega demon. Rengoku's sacrifice and victory in this film, the protection of everyone on the train, resonates with the audience and the characters equally, and it was a deserved emotional payoff. Did you think once we got to spoilers I was gonna shit all over this movie? No way. I've been waiting to talk about some big time pros too. Rengoku single-handedly made this movie a success for me. The negatives of the film come in a couple different places. Firstly, I think the dreams we see of everyone besides Tanjiro were a little too light. I realize this is how it was in the manga as well, but how little we see of their subconscious adds to how superfluous Zenitsu and Inosuke feel to this film. It's an adaptation, so there's room for additional scenes, and I thought at least once more into their dreams would have delivered on some much needed comedy. Secondly, I think the main villain of this arc was a total letdown. I don't even know this dude's name, and I don't want to know because what a massive waste he ended up being. He's just a soft-spoken creep who, uncharacteristic to this series, doesn't get any of his backstory fleshed out, and he has some vague network of desperate sick people who like the dreams he gives them, but that whole plot goes nowhere. He just totally sucked, and then he became a train. The trials he puts the squad through were kind of interesting, but I feel like I've seen the perfect life in a dream thing that Tanjiro goes through 100 times before, and it didn't grab me. The most interesting thing to me were the sick people the demon was manipulating, but that was dropped nearly as quickly as it was introduced. What were they even doing when the train became a big demon? We don't ever see them again, I don't think. I'm assuming they didn't die because that would diminish Rengoku's victory. Overall, it just felt like a total waste on a narrative level to make this big demon built up at the end of season 1 out to be a massive, useless chump. The story itself seems to acknowledge what a disappointment its villain was, since this movie commits a cardinal sin in order to redeem itself at the very end. Out of absolutely fucking nowhere, another even stronger demon shows up and just starts attacking Tanjiro and Rengoku after the train demon is defeated, and I couldn't have been more confused. I get that logically, one of the upper rank demons could show up to fight the squad at any time, but honestly, it's just bad storytelling that this happened without any setup, and it felt like such an ass pull. It felt like this story realized it gave Rengoku nothing to do, and it panicked at the last minute to deliver an epic fight scene, and don't get me wrong, I enjoy this fight very much, but it comes out of nowhere, and this is obviously what I was referring to when I said how confusing the ending of the movie is for a normal, uninitiated viewer. A random demon with a crazy eye shows up, and the world literally explodes with the sheer amount of power he's putting out, and he's talking to Rengoku about becoming a demon, and it's just a lot. What would a solution for this have been? Any kind of foreshadowing of this demon possibly showing up? It could have been a small scene at the beginning of the movie, it could have even been a small line said by the train demon. Any kind of setup for this I would have accepted, but there was none, and it becomes so integral to the plot and theme of the story while killing off the best character, so this random arrival kind of felt cheap. That all being said, once things do get moving, I think his dynamic with Rengoku is really fun. I think it's an excellent action sequence worthy of a film budget, and I think Rengoku's death will have a serious impact on our lead characters in a way that gets them to take this world a bit more seriously, while also serving as a showcase for the power these upper ranked demons possess. So, all in all, I thought that Demon Slayer Mugen Train to Infinity, the first movie no Yaiba, was an okay film. There were some parts, particularly toward the end, that blew me away and showcased some of the best action animation I've ever seen. On the flip side, the story was a little lackluster for a theatrical film, and the overall pacing felt like it could have used some smoothing out. But, despite my criticisms, which I'm sure some of you don't agree with, and I'll contend are largely nitpicks, this film was a massive success, breaking out into mainstream popularity, and I think that's really the greatest thing that this movie pulls off. It wouldn't have been the anime movie I expected to be so successful, because I think it's a little esoteric of a story to show off to newcomers, but whatever works, works. The more successful anime movies there are, the more experimentation with theatrical releases there will be, and particularly in the US, I'd certainly be appreciative of that. At the end of the day, I give this movie a solid 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think it's competent enough while showing an emotional depth paired with some great bombastic action that most contemporary films struggle to pull off. And that's that. I've now officially talked about all the current Demon Slayer adaptations, and at the time of writing this, I'm still eagerly awaiting the release date for Demon Slayer Season 2. Hopefully by the time this video is out, that information has been released, because I really don't want to wait any longer to continue this impressive series. In the meantime, if you want to hear my thoughts on Season 1, I go in depth on each arc in a video that should be linked on your screen now, but it will also be in the description. So I want to know from you guys what your thoughts are on this movie. Did you enjoy the train demon as a villain? Do you love Rengoku as much as I do? And did you generally agree with my review, or did you think I was too harsh? Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I'm hoping to cover Demon Slayer Season 2 in some capacity when it releases, so if you're interested in that, subscribing is the best way to see those upcoming videos. But until then, I'll shut up.